Welcome to Google Plus Developers Live. My name is Chris Cartland, and I'm a developer programs engineer working on the Google Plus platform. I am joined today with Gerwin and Alan, two of our Google developer experts, who have been nice enough to join us to talk about the cool projects that they've been working on. So this is really great. So we get to see not just me talking about the features that we have, but we actually get to see the people who are actually using them to do cool things. And they're really good at what they do, and they'll be able to talk through the reasons behind why they make certain things. And so you can get a really good view of their experience. And so we hope you enjoy today's showcase. So can each of you introduce yourself? Maybe start with Alan.
Hi, I'm Alan Firstenberg. I'm a developer out of New York. I do a lot of work with Google Plus sign-in and the Hangout API on the Google side. And I'm starting to branch out into stuff involving Google Drive and Google Glass.
Great, thank you. Yeah, thanks for joining us. And Gerwin, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Gerwin, developer from Austria. I'm doing a lot of stuff with Google Hangouts API, the Google Plus API, but also with all sorts of different Google APIs that I can get my hands on or can't get my hands on.
That's awesome. Well, thank you also for joining us. So today we're going to have each of them talk about some of the projects they're working on. And then we're going to have a little bit of a discussion about Google Plus and Google Plus sign-in. And then, of course, we'll talk a little bit about upcoming Google I/O. So to start off, Gerwin, can you tell us a little bit about your Hangout app called Draw Here?
Yeah, so I wrote a Hangout app that allows you to draw stuff on your video stream, and I think the best way to show it is to actually show it. So what I can do, I have here cursor, and I can actually use this to draw directly on my video stream. Now, if I could draw nicely, this would actually look nice, but I can do other stuff. I couldn't do just change the color, and I can do rectangles. And one thing I think is nice about it, you can use it for fun stuff like just drawing flowers or something, but you can also use it like sort of a whiteboard. So if you draw you can use it to create some sort of whiteboard in your app, and then you can actually use it to, let's just switch to a pointer and let's make this one small, and then you can just do it to show off calculations or something. So you can use it for all sorts of different stuff, and I think it's pretty cool. So you can use it for educational stuff, you can use it to show stuff, and one other feature you can use it for, you can actually use it to show photos to your view. So what I'm going to use, I'm gonna just share a screenshot of the app itself so you can see it. So what I do, I just drag the screenshot into the app, and you see the screenshot now directly into display, and I can actually draw on the screenshot which I imported. And as you can see, what is happening is you have on the one side you have a drawing canvas where you actually do the drawing, and what happens is whenever you update something on the drawing side, it updates an overlay which is displayed above your video stream. So that's what's happening, and you have some tools here like the squares, circles, you have an eraser, and you can draw images in, and then you can just remove the image and you're back to normal.
Yeah, that's great. So what you're doing here is using the overlay to get whatever you want onto the stream, onto the screen, which is really cool, right? What do you think this means for developers? Because some people will want to use this right away and just be like, yeah, this is fun to draw. But where do you think this, and either of you can chime in, where do you think this might go, as far as what this technology can do?
Yeah, so what I discovered is that actually the overlays can be updated rather quickly. So I managed to get 10 frame updates per second. So what this means is that you can actually use it to just illustrate a lot of stuff without other people having to install an app, because it's displayed directly on your video feed. The only limitation is the video transfer quality, because it can get a little bit choppy if you're on a slow connection, because it's just the video image that is transferred. But you can, so the technology behind is actually pretty easy, because you just create the overlay from whatever source you want to create it from. So in this case, because I'm having the canvas, I'm just taking the data URI from a canvas and creating a object from it. But you can use it, for example, if you're in a family frame, you have some family pictures, you have some vacation pictures which you want to show, and you don't want your grandparents to have to install another application. You can just put the photos in there and show them to them easily. So there are a lot of use cases where you can use the overlay in settings where for example, if you're in a Hangout on Air, you can't use other applications because they won't display on the screen. So you can use this method to just display content of what kind of ever to the audience. So you could actually have like animated row of words like you see in some news where you have the stock prices going down below. So you can use it for those kinds of settings where you have live tickers coming in on all in your overlay. So you could use it in news settings. And as I said, the update is pretty immediate, so that works pretty nicely.
That's really cool. And I see two things that are really cool about that. One is that it's really easy for any application to put any data into that view. So you happen to make it a drawing app, but you could do other things with that. And the second thing was that you don't need everybody else in the Hangout to actually use the app or join the app in order to see it. So for example, right now, I'm not using the Hangouts app that you wrote, but I'm still able to see the things that you draw on the screen. And so those two things are really cool, and it makes it a pretty fun application.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of power to overlays. It's probably one of the most powerful features that we have right now that's been explored as part of the Hangout API. And we see a lot of different uses of it, from the simple lower thirds that we see in things like Hangout Toolbox to the very dynamic aspect that we're seeing in Draw here. I think that's really the place that a lot of people, that's rich for exploration in the API right now.
And also, Gerwin, you said that this looks like there might be a lot of work behind the scenes to make the Hangouts part of this work. And can you say a little bit how difficult that was or how easy that was?
Yeah, so actually the Hangout part is the easy part because you really just have an image URL or you have a data URI and you just create an image resource from it and then you just display the overlay. So actually the most difficult part about it is because I work with more than one layer, is that at the moment the API doesn't allow you to define the order in which they are displayed. So if I want to put in one layer above the other, I have to make sure I create them in the right order. And if you want to change the order, you have to remove all of them and create all of them in the right order again. So that's maybe the trickiest part about it. But in the end, it's just take the image URL and put it on, and that's like 3 lines of code, really.
Okay, cool. So those 3 lines, you can put your image data, however you create that, into that. Yeah, that's very awesome. Cool. Yeah, well, thanks for showing that to us. That's a pretty cool application. And also, another thing that Alan wanted to show is a different app. We'll switch gears a little bit here. Thanks, for Draw here. And this one's called Where Am I? So, Alan, can you tell us a little bit about this app?
Sure. Where Am I? Yeah, let's see if I can bring it up. I'm not sure how well you can see it. Is a simple app that was built based on request. A couple of people came to me and said, hey, is there a good way that we can share the URL for the Hangout or the Hangout on Air that we're running with other people, either through email or through chat or through some other social networks? And I said, well, we have access to that information. So I wrote an app that would display it. And then I wrote an app so that it would, as part of that, I made it so that it would shorten it into a goo.gl short URL. And then they said, hey, it would also be great if there was a way that we could get access to the YouTube URL and that other people in the Hangout with me can also see that same YouTube URL before we start. So I added that. And then they said, hey, wouldn't it be great if that everybody who joined automatically joined running Hangout Toolbox? So I added an option to do that. And all of these are making use of the same part of the API. Hang on just a moment. Making use of different parts of the Google APIs that are out there. So the URL shortener is one API. It makes use of the Hangout API. It combines it with some other features and puts it all together in a concise, simple way to do things and make it available to everyone in the Hangout. So for example, the YouTube URL under the current API is only available to the person who starts the Hangout. And I was able to make use of the shared state that's part of every Hangout and put the URL into the shared state so anybody who's running the Where Am I app has access to it.
Yeah, that's really cool. And what I think is really great about this is it's really great that you were able to keep saying, hey, wouldn't it be great if? And every time you asked that question to yourself, you just kept going and adding like one more thing, and you ended up with a lot of different features in a pretty simple app that this is still useful for the people who use it. And now we need a turn off phone call extension. And I wonder, wouldn't it be great if? No, that's great. Yeah, that's a really cool app. Where am I? So those are two cool apps that actually run in Hangouts. Let's switch back to Gerwin to talk about something a little more technical and what he's done with Dart.
Yeah, so I've been looking into Dart recently because I met up with some of the Dart team recently and some of the Dart developer experts really, and they really got me thinking, okay, let's just try out Dart. And of course, usually when I try out new things, I try to combine them with things I already know. So I know Hangouts really well. So I thought, okay, how would I go about writing a Hangout application in Dart? And what I ended up doing in the end is wrote a complete wrapper around the Hangouts API, because the Hangouts API needs JavaScript calls, but in Dart you can wrap JavaScript calls into scope so you can access it. So what I did is write a complete Dart wrapper for it. And the nice thing about it is, with Dart being a typed language, you have the Dart editor with all the nice features of auto-completion. So you don't have to remember exactly how all the different calls are called. So was it on state changed or on state change? Because you just have the auto-completion in there. And just gonna quickly screen share how this looks like in the Dart editor.
Okay. Yeah, it's great. So you can take advantage of auto-completion when you're writing Hangouts apps, which is something that you couldn't do before.
So basically what I have here included my Hangouts library. And what I do here, I create a new Hangout API class entity, and then I have here the normal setup where I have the onAPI_ready.add, where I have the onAPI_ready event to listen when the API is ready. And once the API is ready, I can do several stuff in here. So if I have my main Hangout API object, and I have here the auto-completion, this might be a little bit small in the screenshot, but I have all the different namespaces in here. So I can, for example, take the data namespace, and in here I have the onState changed event, for example, which listens for changes in the shared state. And I change event, sorry. And once I'm in here, not this one, on stage, sorry, that's about at here. That's live coding, so.
That's great.
And then I have the event in here, and if I have the event in here, I have actually the properties that are inside of this event, which are sometimes hard to remember. So I see the state changed event has the edit keys, and it has the metadata, and it has removed keys, and it actually has the full state. So I can actually just access those parameters, and that's actually, I have length here and can cycle through the values. And so I think it's actually pretty fun to write Hangout applications in, wait, just gonna end the screen share. Mm-hmm. So I actually find it even more fun than writing them in JavaScript, because in JavaScript you don't have the auto-completion feature. You just have to switch to the documentation all the time. You have to look up stuff, and in this case you actually have the documentation included in the library. So I think that's a pretty neat feature.
Mm-hmm. And to see like what you did to make this happen is you actually wrote the library that you're using to make an app right now.
I wrote the library myself so I can access it. So what I did, I'm just switching to screen share quickly again. So for example, if we look at just go here in the onState changed, I have define the event handler itself, and then inside the code I have all those JScope parts, which actually then initialize the JavaScript call to the actual API. So I have the proxy calls to the actual APIs. So I actually wrapped it quite a bit, so I don't have to write too much JavaScript code in the end. But so I wrote the full library, and then I actually included the documentation for all the parameters, so you could actually make a Dart doc out of it with all the Hangouts API explained for you.
Yeah, that's great.
Automatically.
No, that's pretty amazing. And then I'm sure you're going to be continuing to use this library in order to make other cool applications.
Yeah. So the only problem at the moment is that somehow the Dart2JS compiler doesn't really like some parts in it, so you can't compile it to JavaScript and run it in normal browser. You have to run it in Dartseum at the moment.
Okay. So there's a couple things that need to be fixed before it's ready to
I'm not
just
quite
go.
sure. I'm not really. Probably because I dynamically load JavaScript on the Dart side, so there's something where the Dart.js compiler might be a little bit confused.
Well, I'm
I have to look
confident.
into this in detail, but I have no problem running it in Dartium. It's just not. It's
Yeah.
just a very small percentage of people who will actually be able to run it that way. So
And I'm confident you'll be able to figure out what the next steps are with this project. But yeah, that's
Yeah.
really great, and thanks for showing us. Great. Alan, you have another project that you're also working on, which is with Node.js. So I'll let you introduce that one yourself.
As my phone starts ringing again. Yeah, I'm working on a project with Node.js that's basically a demonstration project for using Node.js with the Google Plus sign-in. And it's kind of meant as an illustration for how to do the hybrid authorization flow that we've defined, that you guys have defined as part of the Google Plus sign-in. And let me share my screen
Yeah,
again.
so
and
you're
I can
talking
show
about
you
using the one-time code flow where you send a code from a web client to your server in order to get your server authorized for making API requests.
That's correct. So basically what this lets you do is to handle some of the authentication with the Google Plus sign-in button on the client side, and it will then send a one-time code to the server, and then your server can, from this code, get an authentication token and a refresh token, which it can then use pretty much as long as you're authorized, as long as the user has authorized the app to run it. The code is available in GitHub. Everyone is welcome to take a look at it, comment on it, criticize it. The couple of notable things here is that it uses Node.js, so it's JavaScript on the server, and it uses a package from Google that handles accessing the Google Plus library. And in fact, it's meant to handle accessing any of Google's client-side libraries through the Node.js JavaScript. So this is a case where work that's already been done to create the Google Plus libraries, to create Drive libraries, to create pretty much the authentication libraries, all of this stuff has already been done, and now it's just being leveraged on the Node.js side based on an additional library that's coming from Google.
And this is a really new library that Google's. It's not fully launched. It's like I think it's in alpha stage right now.
It is still in alpha stage.
Right.
It is version 0.2.5 when I last checked it out. And when I first started playing with it, I found some bugs and reported the bugs, and they got fixed very promptly. So Google is looking forward to people trying it out, kicking the tires, finding where the problems are, and working to improve them.
Yeah, well, it's great to see where this is going too. And that is a coverage test of like all of the authentication and authorization APIs using Node.js on your server. So that's great. Yeah. Was there anything else that you wanted to add about that? I mean, I think that seems really cool.
It's wonderful for me. I released it as public code because I think other people can profit from it. I know this is certainly the code that's becoming the cornerstone for just about everything else that I'm writing against Google's APIs these days in Node.js. So it's now the cornerstone of all my other work.
That's great. So speaking of Google Plus sign-in, what other projects have you guys, or what's been your impression over the past weeks since Google Plus sign-in has launched? What have you guys been doing to play with it, and what do you guys like about it?
yeah,
You want to start, Gerwin?
yeah, sure. So I think it's really a neat concept to finally have unified. Like I wouldn't even call it Google Plus sign-in button, but I would call it like a Google sign-in button, because you can use it with all those other APIs you want to use from Google as well. And so it's finally, you could use Google sign in before, but you never had like this branding, this unique button which is the same for all the websites really. So it's the same flow for all applications that use the sign in button. So I think it's really good that people know, okay, they know what to expect when they click the button. And I think that's really important, because you could have some sign-in button on your page, but people could never know what happens when they click the button. But now with the Google Plus sign-in, they know, okay, so that's going to happen when they have used it before.
I agree, and I think in addition to that, one of the great things is that it's actually simplified it a lot for client-side developers, and even simplified it to some extent for server-side developers too. The button takes care of a good chunk of the legwork that we needed to do. So if you're doing client-side stuff, you can now you can almost ignore authentication and authorization issues, leaving it to the sign-in button to handle it all for you. And on the server side, there's just a little bit of additional work that you need to do to get it right. You no longer need to worry as much about, am I requesting an online or an offline token? Am I, what am I doing? Do I need to set up my redirects correctly? The button's really handling almost all of that for you now.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I'm glad to hear that feedback.
One thing I really like from the user point of perspective is that you now have this new page, this plus.google.com/apps, which shows you all the apps which you have used with the Google Plus sign-in button, and allows you to change settings, like allows you to change the visible people to the application, and allows you to change who can see your app activities. And I'm actually not quite sure how many people have actively used this page, so I'm just going to screen share it for people to see how it looks like.
And so this is at plus.google.com/apps.
Yeah, it's /apps, and it actually lists all applications which you've been using. And as you can see, I've been doing some testing.
Mm-hmm.
So I have quite a few apps in here, and it tells you, down here, it tells you what app activities the application writes, and it shows you who can see your activities. And you actually can directly from here delete all the activities, disconnect the application. And I think that's a very good start, where you can actually see what's going on, and you actually have link to applications in here. So, which is, I think it's much better than the previous system where you had to revoke the app access from your profile settings. I think that's the way to go, because it's much more user-friendly than the other
And it provides more functionality, so it makes it easier to control the authorization that you've granted to other applications. And it also looks nicer.
It's still missing some functionality, because you don't have the other scopes, you just have the Google Plus login scopes, and you could have a Google Drive scope in there, or Latitude scope, or Mirror API scope, or...
So it hasn't surfaced all the information in that UI.
It just has the Google Plus information in there, but you could actually request more access in your application, which isn't surfaced in this part of the display yet.
Yeah, I think the neat part about app activities, aside from the fact that it's a great way for applications and websites, so forth, to get information into Google Plus, is also to see what Google as a whole is using with them. I mean, we know that app activities are increasingly going to be factored into search results and search plus your world type results. So having users using your application and you generating app activities for specific types of events is going to be a great feature, and it's going to be something that users will increasingly be able to take advantage of.
Yeah, and I like how you touched on how this is trying to make all of Google better, because Google Plus really is designed to be that social core to everything that we do at Google. So we're really excited with things like app activity, where we can start surfacing that information in places that it's useful and meaningful for users. And so there's a lot of cool stuff that we think we can do with this, and we're looking forward to what we can do next. Yeah, Alan, did either of you want to talk about interactive posts? I think I've been seeing a lot of activity with that around recently. What do you guys think about that feature?
I think a lot of people have about a week or two ago, people suddenly understood what it was and how it can be used, and we're seeing a lot more of them cropping up since then. I think there are some great applications for interactive posts. I know that a couple of people I've talked to about it have really started thinking of it in terms of not just a way to share things, but a way to actually have people more directly interact with websites, so that the post itself could be talking about a website, and the call to action part can literally be a call to action, actually doing something, actually starting a program, reading a particular page, starting a game, joining a hangout. All of these things are things we're starting to see with the call to action, and I love it. I think it's a great new way to interact with things. I think people initially were very concerned that it looked like it was just going to be all about buying. And once more information came out, and once people really started to understood that it's doing things as opposed to just reading things or seeing things, they got a lot more excited about the potential of it.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, we've seen a lot of interest in and a lot of thought into how interactive posts can make individual applications useful, because that's something that there isn't like a one-size-fits-all solution for different applications, because it's a really powerful thing that's deeper than anything that can really fit everyone perfectly. And that's why we have a long list of call to action buttons that developers can choose, because your application is unique and your use case is powerful in its own way, and we need to make sure that you have that opportunity to make something really cool with the interactive posts, to help drive engagement and make your posts more useful to users. So there's a lot of cool stuff in there. So are you guys going to be using Google Plus sign-in, you think, in your applications as you keep making more? Like it's a new thing, but what do you guys think of it so far?
Yeah, so I'm definitely... Yeah, sorry.
Go ahead, Gerwin. You go.
Yeah, so I'm definitely going to use it more in the future. So I actually for all the new projects I started with the cloud endpoints and everything, I use the authentication method pretty much everywhere now where I need authentication. Where it's possible, I'm still trying to figure out how to make it work in Chrome extensions. But
and I'm the same way. I mean, at this point, I'm looking at doing Drive development. I'm looking at doing Glass development. And for all of those applications, they're both rely on OAuth. And if it relies on OAuth, I intend to be using Google Plus Sign-In. That's why I created the Node.js sample package, because that's the basis of me building off everything else that I'm doing these days.
Yeah, it's really exciting. And you mentioned Glass, and I heard a little rumor about one of Gerwin's projects, and I don't know exactly what that is, but maybe Gerwin can give us just a brief summary of like what he's trying to work on right now.
Yeah, so I did quite a few stuff with the Mirror API without actually having access to it, because I'm not US and I don't have Glass. But so I wrote my own emulator because the Mirror API, it's a discovery-based API, so you can and with cloud endpoints on App Engine, you can create your own discovery-based API. So I just copied all the calls, basically. And what I did now for an example how to use the Mirror API, I used a Hangout application, which I've written in Dart using my Dart wrapper. And this actually takes information from the Google Plus API to tell you more about the people inside of the Hangout and displays them for you for Glass. So if you're sitting in a Hangout like we are now, and I could just turn on Glass and say, oh, Chris, he's working at Google. Didn't know that.
That's really neat. So there's a lot of pieces in there.
Yeah. So I'm just combining different pieces and throwing them all together and see what comes out of it.
Yeah, no, that's really amazing. So make sure I got all the pieces in there. You had your Dart wrapper that we already talked about today to make a Hangouts app. And with the Hangouts app, you are using the Mirror API and the Google Plus API to bring relevant content to the people wearing Glass.
Exactly.
That's great. Sounds exciting. I'm looking forward to the future. That's awesome. Speaking of what's coming up, next week is Google I/O, and I believe both of you will be coming out is that right, to visit us in California?
Yep.
That's right.
Yeah, we look forward to having you here. You think that there's going to be a lot of cool things. What's most exciting for, why would you make the trip all the way out to California? I know, Alan, you're in New York, and Gerwin, you have even farther to go. You said, how far is it for you to travel, Gerwin?
Yeah, I think it's about, I have the flight to London for 2 hours, and then I have like a 10 or 11 hour flight to San Francisco, and lots of waiting time in between, so it's going to be a while.
Yeah, great. So yeah, what's really driving you to make that long trip out to California next week?
So what I find really exciting about I/O is meeting all the people. It's just like you have about 5,000 very enthusiastic developers all in one place, so there's a lot of energy in there, and you can just go to people, talk to people, get ideas, exchange ideas. So I'm not so much, so the talks might be interesting, but you can always listen to the talks on YouTube later. but it's just the time in between the talks where I have chance to talk to the Google teams, where I have chance to talk to other developers working with the APIs to see how they are using it. And it's just all about the people you meet there, which you can't in normal life, which doesn't happen so often.
When I went to I/O last year, it was the first time I had been to I/O. I didn't know what to expect. I kind of went to every session I could, talk to everyone that I could, and I found the sessions that were most useful to me were the ones that were most surprising to me. So I went to sessions on Drive, for example, knowing absolutely nothing about Google Drive before then. And in the year since then, I've done quite a bit with Drive. I've learned a lot more about it. I had some questions about maps last year. I stopped by the help desk and got some really good answers about how to continue and where to get more information. So I think the best part of Google I/O, as Gerwin said, it's networking with other people, being able to go up to them and talk to them and get inspired by some of what they're doing.
Yeah, it should be a really exciting time. I'm looking forward to next week as well. For the people who are not able to make it to I/O or are watching the event after, or who are not able to make it to I/O, there are some I/O extended events, which last I checked there were over 370, I think, Google I/O extended events around the world. And are there some in the areas where you are, Alan and Gerwin?
I know that there are 3 in the New York area. One of them is run by the Google Developer Group in Manhattan, and a couple of other companies are holding their own I/O viewing events. And from what I understand, they're always exciting and always interesting to follow.
Yeah, and we have one in Vienna as well. So we have our GDG Vienna group, which is organizing an event, and we're expecting around 100 people, I think, which are coming there. And actually, my first impression of I/O was an I/O Extended event, and actually I/O Extended it's really like a small I/O, because there as well you get to meet other people who are excited about the topic. So if you're in an area where you have an I/O Extended near you, make sure to go there, because you get a lot of the feeling you have at the I/O Extended event, and most I/O Extended events will actually have people from I/O calling in for the local group. So I will probably call into our local GDG Vienna group for a hangout to tell them how it's like. And
yeah, that's great. And for the people who aren't able to make it to one of these events and aren't able to be at I/O, of course, all of the talks will be recorded, and you can watch those sessions later. Also, there will be a lot of people posting on Google Plus and other places online about what they find and what they learn at Google I/O. So if you want to keep up in real time, we're going to be using the hashtag IO13. So there's going to be a lot of cool stuff that comes out as people learn about whatever the topics are. We have a lot of different tracks that you can follow. For example, Google Plus has a track that I think has about 14 sessions. So there's a lot of different things, little topics that you can learn about. I'll be giving a talk on cross-platform auth with Google Plus sign-in. So if you're interested in how to use auth with different platforms like Android, iOS, and web, as well as dealing with a server, you should come out and watch that. Was there anything else about I/O that you guys were looking forward to next week? Anything else for the people watching? Like what should they be looking forward to and keep an eye out?
The keynote's going to be exciting because it's always exciting, but I really think, again, in the spirit of networking with people, follow people who are going to I/O. A lot of them are really excited about being there and will talk and post endlessly about what they're finding and discovering. I know last year I posted dozens and dozens of times during sessions about what I was seeing. And it was great, the conversations that sprung up because of what I was posting.
yeah, and you can probably follow the IO13 hashtag. And there's also the Google I/O community where people will be posting and talking a lot, I think.
Yeah, the Google I/O community has already got some good conversations going, and I'm sure it's just going to get better as we get closer to the actual event. But yeah, well, that's going to be really great. Thank you so much for joining us today, Alan and Gerwin. For these people that you see in front of me are great because not only are they making cool stuff with our services at Google, they're also helping us out. So when you ask questions in the Google Plus developers community, they're often the ones that are solving the problems. And if you see questions on, if you ask questions on Stack Overflow, they're out there helping answer them. So I really want to thank them not only for joining me today, but for helping out and supporting all the developers around the world with Google+. Great. So thank you so much, Alan and Gerwin, and we'll hope to have you on again another time. And thanks everyone for watching, and we'll see you next week. Or sorry, we won't see you next week because we'll be getting ready for I/O, but we'll see you soon. Thanks so much.